Hey guys, Common Sense Outdoorsman here. I'm back to do another knife test. And this is going to be, I'm going to go straight through about 25 minutes. I'm going to aim for 25 minutes, but I want it to be real time so you can see the wear put on the knife. And do what I do. When I watch a video like that, watch it and fast forward, and at least you can see all the action and that I'm really putting some wear on this knife. Okay? And the knife is going to be the Old Timer 169 OT. This is a part of the new Heritage series. I have an earlier video, tabletop video on this knife. Now I'm going to work it out as D2 steel. Earlier, I did a review on this knife in the sub-zero weather. This is the Kubi Sicario. Did very well, D2. Maybe this D2 steel comes from the same factory overseas. I don't know. I'm not sure. Be interesting to know that. But anyways, today, unfortunately, even though it's after Thanksgiving, I don't have sub-zero weather. Here at 10,000 feet in the Colorado Rockies today after Thanksgiving, it's probably, it's in the high 50s right now. So it's not cold weather. I'll try to do that again in the future. But I'm just going to go along straight through, so excuse my flubs and misspeaks. That'll happen. But I just want you to see in real time some wear I put on this knife. And this isn't a video on how to use a knife, and don't do that with this knife, and you shouldn't do nothing about that. This is just putting wear on this knife. I have three types of wood here. I have some dead fallen aspen, some dead standing pine, and dead standing spruce. I believe the spruce to be the toughest, tougher than the pine, and the aspen is probably a little easier to work with. Dry wood here in Colorado, it can get pretty hard. When it's overly dried and past the petrified state, it can start to crumble, and then it's no good to use. But this is all good workable wood. It should be at its peak hardness, and we'll go along and we'll see, if the spruce does seem harder than the pine. But anyways, the Old Timer 169 OT. Let's put it to work. I'm going to move the camera around maybe sometime. I'm going to work right here on top of this log. Hopefully everything works out okay. So not to waste any time, let's go. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have different batons. We'll split this as a piece of pine. But let me prepare a pine baton, and I'm just going to chop these knots off with this Old Timer knife. Start to put some wear on it. Again, this isn't anything about this is what you should do with your knife. Do whatever you want with your knife, really, but this is just putting wear on this D2. Of course, the thing with D2 is a lot of people say, that D2 is chippy, it can break easy, and that hasn't been my experience. That's why I'm doing this with some D2 knives. So let's see what this knife does. Right now I'm just chopping these knots off this piece of pine, and I'll use this piece of pine as a heavier baton if I need it. My lighter one is the aspen baton. So there, I've got a pine baton. Now here's a good decent thickness. I'd say that's probably about close to 4 inches thick. Let's see if we can, how it does batoning this piece of pine in half. And this is good solid wood. It's hard, it's not rotted. It was dead standing. It's a good solid piece of pine. Yeah, that's definitely a good solid piece of pine. So, wow. This is definitely putting some good pressure on the tip of this knife. I mean, it doesn't even want to go through there. It's starting to crack and split. This is probably a bigger piece than what I should have started with. Wow. this is taking more time than I wanted it to. So right off the bat, we're putting this knife to a good test. See if I can get a bigger hunk of this tip. There we go. Wow. All right. That was already an excellent test of this knife. That was a heavy piece of pine to be batoning. Let's go to a smaller piece with a couple of knots. This is the aspen, and it should have no problem going through this. Again, guys, keep in mind, this is just putting wear on this knife. That's all I'm trying to do. Test this knife out. That was pretty easy. No problems there. Let's baton. This was a dead fallen piece of aspen. Let's baton this down. Should be no problem. It's got a few knots in it. This is already some good wear on this knife. Now these edges, or the edge on this knife, is a fairly good fat knife, and a lot of times manufacturers will do that with D2. So it's a good strong edge. Eventually I'll take it down. It's probably close to 25 degrees. I'll take it down closer to 20 degrees on each side when I do sharpen it. So no problem going through this aspen. It's a nice piece to do some cutting on. Of course, making feathers is always something you want a knife to do for woodscraft, bushcraft. I have to hold this at a steeper angle because the edge is a little fat, and these pieces are going to fall off the stick because it's fairly dry. Hopefully you can see this okay, but it feathers nicely. No problems there. Put this piece aside. Here's a piece of spruce. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Again, just putting wear on this knife. Testing this D2 steel. And that's the only objective here. And this is a good way to put wear on it, just chopping knots off. Get these out of my face. So I bought this knife on Amazon. I had that in my tabletop video for, I think it was about $48 or $49. So far, proving to be a really good deal at that price. Maybe out of camera shot there. Not really a chopper knife. This knife it's a laminate wood handle which is, you know, it's a little slippery. It does have some traction grooves on there. But what I'm doing is when I'm chopping, I'm going back like this, and that little pommel hook is going between my fingers, and I'm able to hold it and grip it and chop fairly well. So it's not a chopper, but certainly can do it. All right, so it's a little bit more wear on it with that spruce. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we baton down this piece of spruce? That'll be a challenge. I know you can't see the top. This piece is about, it's more than 2 foot long, and at the widest, that's probably, it's over 2 inches. So it's going to be a big piece to baton down, and I'll baton it with my piece of pine baton. Yeah, this spruce is heavy. You can hear that. That is a solid, heavy piece of wood. So it's definitely no joke, but that old timer went right through it, no problems. I'm just going to take a quick peek at the edge. I don't see any problems at all. Yeah, that spruce, dead standing spruce, that's a good solid piece of wood. I think it's a good test. All right. See how this spruce feathers with this old timer 169 OT. A bigger chunk there than what I wanted. That's every time you use a different knife, you gotta figure out the angles. There's a little knot there that's holding me up. So it still seems sharp. And of course, I forgot to bring paper, dang it. I wanted to do the before and after cut, but I'll be honest with you. It's still sharp. This isn't my preferred knife for making feathers. Like I said, I like a smaller or a lesser of an angle, closer to 20 degrees each side. And I'm going to guess this one seems to be about 25 degrees each side, maybe a little more. But it's still sharp. It'll still make feathers just fine. So again, that's a piece of spruce. All right. So far, so good. Let's baton up on this piece of pine some more. I don't know how you guys feel about batoning. There's a lot of people who never baton your knife. I don't know. I say if it's your knife, do what you want with it. It certainly is a good method to, if you don't have your axe, it is a good method to process some wood. Certainly at least to process some kindling. I'm putting this knife through a little bit more than what I usually would normally, but again, this is a knife test. Testing this D2 steel from overseas. And so far, this D2 steel from overseas, doing pretty good. Trying to keep the pine and the spruce in separate piles so I won't get it mixed up. Again, this is a piece of pine, dead standing pine. Really at a good tough hardness. It's not rotted, it's not wet, it's just perfectly dried. It would be good firewood right now, really, but this knife is having no trouble with it. See what happens if we make a little curls. And when you're making some feathers or curls, it's best to get it on a sharp edge, kind of curl it lightly. You want to have some fine curls mixed in with your bigger curls, you know, when you're doing firecraft and you're trying to prepare some wood, trying to prepare some tinder for get a fire started. Feathers are one way to do that, and this is really feathery, even up towards the tip. It's really feathering nicely. I think certain knife shapes do better at feather sticking than others, and we'll talk about that in another video. But this is certainly doing a good job, and this knife is still very sharp. No problems there. All right, well, let's do some more chopping with this knife. And let's chop. Put this aspen aside. Let's chop on this piece of spruce, and this spruce does seem to be the toughest wood that I've got here. And again, I'm just testing this D2, this Chinese D2 steel. If I wanted to cut this piece of wood at this point, I'd use my saw, but I'm just putting some wear, and I do have a knot over here, so going through a little bit of a knotty section. This is nothing about chopping technique. It's just about putting wear on this knife. And yeah, this is a solid. I'm still going through the bark. This is a solid piece of spruce. And I'm not trying to kill myself or chop through this in just a few easy strokes. I just want this blade to contact this hardwood as much as possible. Doesn't seem to be any kind of a problem yet. Definitely not a knife for chopping. If you did have to chop something, I would choose a larger, heavier knife. This knife, I think, weighs like 10 and a half ounces, I'm sorry. It's one of my flubs I warned you about. It happens. And I'll give this knife another little workout next time we get some freezing weather and these logs have frozen up a bit. So, again, I'm trying to do things with this knife that I normally wouldn't do with it, so I'm pushing it a little harder than usual. I'm not intending to break it. I do not want to break this knife on purpose. If I wanted to break it, I probably could, but that's not what you do with your knife. I'm trying to make it realistic and just work it hard. And this is about the limits of what I would do with this knife. Okay, so I do wish the handle had more traction to it. It's okay. It's comfortable. It's very comfortable. It is a little slickery, if I may make up a new word. But I do like the knife. So far, so good. Let's you know, when I test the tip again, could I take this knife and jam it in there and snap? I probably could, and I probably could snap that tip, but that's not what my goal is. I just want to make sure, and you saw how I beat on, especially batoning that first piece of pine. That was a tough piece of wood, and I was just beating on that tip, and it held together. So let's see how it does. See, it gets stuck in there. I'm giving it a little forgiveness because I don't want to just stupidly snap that tip off. And if I did have to use the tip on something like this, like maybe I had to drill a hole and this is all I had, I would just work it slowly and easily, take my time, and not try to break the tip of my knife because I probably need it. Yep, the spruce is definitely has some hardness to it. That's the bark. I've kind of have gotten a little deeper there, and yeah, I have no doubt that I could jam this in there and snap that tip off. But I think this would be about the most extreme thing I would do with this tip, and if it can do this, that does tell me that the knife is, this D2 is properly heat treated, and you know, that tip is staying intact. Let's do a little more chopping. So yeah, some people don't like D2. Say it's just too chippy, too brittle, carbides are too big, and that may be true or can be true if there's a bad heat treat, but I think on these overseas knives, I've got a few of them and they are doing really good. I'm getting to the hard part of this wood. They are doing really good with their heat treat, and if you do it right and you follow the recipe for D2 and you use the cryogenics, and it's that heat treat that makes this knife steel very tough and very hard and wear resistant, and it does hold an edge. So I can see, hey, if it was a cheap D2 knife and it wasn't heat treated properly or it wasn't heat treated well, yeah, I can understand how it'll be brittle and how they can break, and there's videos out there of that. But in my opinion, properly heat treated D2 is an excellent knife steel. It does hold an edge for a good long time. It is not an expensive steel. You can get D2 knives today for a song and a dance. Overseas production, you know, if you get a good US made knife, it's going to cost you some money. There's no doubt about it, but you get what you can get, and if what you can afford is an overseas knife and it's D2, my opinion, so far, so good. Yeah, this wood This is really tough down in here. No doubt about it. Let's go back to the tip. See, I've got a hole here now, so that's just gonna, I'm afraid if I get that in there, force it too much, that tip will break off, but it's doing pretty good. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Is this as tough as an SE 1095 knife? Probably not, but so far it's proving to be fairly tough and definitely usable. Would I choose this knife or a D2 knife as my main survival knife? Maybe not. There's so many knives out there, and there is tougher steel. May not be my choice, but if I had a D2 knife like this and I was in a tough situation, I'd feel okay with it. And plus D2 does give you some corrosion resistance, which is nice. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but the knife does want to slip forward on me unless I really keep a tight grip on it. But that's okay. I can live with that. Very hard spruce. Yeah, pretty much think we're gonna get through this here. Just want to make it all the way through this log, complete it. Yeah, it's definitely harder than I thought it was. So let's break this off and say we're done. So that wasn't much of a challenge for this Kubi. That is a solid piece of wood. I hate to do this, but that's a solid hunk. Let's see what happens here. Baton through this piece of spruce. Wow. Dang. All right. Yeah. All right. I don't want to really pound on the handle and the bolsters because I am afraid that might, oh, I'm going to do it a little bit. What the heck? Wow. That is a tough piece of spruce. And it's not just splitting because it's not that weak dry wood. This is some tough spruce. Okay. Whew. All right, let me beat this back on there. Wow. Whew. There's a knot at the end. Wow. Bark. All right, that's a tough piece of spruce. What's that? Piece of pine. So here's the piece of pine I was feathering on earlier. Yeah, still sharp. There's the closer to the tip. Still very sharp, no problems. Guys, I don't want to make this video too long, so let me wipe this off on my pants. Pants drop it a little bit. I mean, I don't see, there's no damage on this edge. I'll just be honest with you. I know the sun is kind of wreaking havoc, but this edge is good. I'm going to call this a pass. Not take up much more of your time on the Old Timer 169 OT Heritage Series. Check out my tabletop video on this, the discussion when I first got it. I will put this knife through some more use in freezing weather with freezing wood in the future, but I recommend this knife. I really like it. Really like this knife. So, hey, this is Common Sense Outdoorsman, guys. You take care, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.